I'll seek you out, flay you alive.
Hey guys, Pogo here, and welcome to the next episode of Working with PHP. In this episode, we are going to learn how to deal with arrays. So for those of you that don't know what an array is, it is basically a collection of values of the same type collected into one variable where each value has an index. So for example, let's say that we are in school and we're in a classroom and we want to have a list of all of the students who are in a particular class. We could have an array of students because all students have the same type. They're all students. So the type of the array would be student. And within this, we would have, for each student, we would have a different entry for them. And each one has an index. So student number 1 would be at index 0 because in PHP and most languages, the indices start at 0. So the first index is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. And that'll make more sense once we look at it. So we're going to learn about declaring arrays and then a couple of neat tricks how to work with arrays in PHP. And as we go through this, I'll provide more examples and more explanations of different things. So we're going to go ahead and start with an array. We're going to create an array called languages. And this is going to contain all of the languages that I have done on my channel. So we'll just go ahead and put in there Java, and we'll put in Java, PHP, and Swift. Those are the languages that I have right now. We'll also throw in JavaScript because I don't think I've done that yet, but I will certainly be doing that. So we have this variable which we'll call languages, and we still use the $sign. There's nothing too special about this. Is equal to. Then we use the array word, and we use this array function. And inside of here, that's where we put all of the values. So we'll go ahead and put in Java, PHP, JavaScript, and Swift. So this is, or I'll put my comments, creating an array. So this array now contains 4 values: Java, PHP, JavaScript, and Swift. So instead of having 4 variables, language 1, language 2, language 3, language 4, or if I had a Java variable, a PHP variable, JavaScript variable, or Swift variable, this is essentially a list of languages instead of separate variables. Now, the thing that I said about the indices, if you look at it, Java is the first element in this array. It's the first thing that you see. So its index, it's basically its ID number is 0. So if I want to find the 0th element, it would be Java. PHP would be the first, because Java is 0. JavaScript is the second, and Swift is the third. So the size of this array is 4. The greatest index is 4 minus 1, which is 3. So in arrays, it has all of the data, and then each piece of data has an index that identifies it. Kind of like a key and a value, an X and a Y. If you think of an X and a Y table, each X value has some Y value that correlates to the X. So that is how that works. So now that we have this array created, let's say that we want to use it. The first thing is we can say echo the array for debugging. So if we want to debug the array, of course, obviously, we know what's going to be in this array, but if we create an array, or we use one of the built-in arrays like get or post or session, then we might want to see what exactly is in there. We can't just write echo. We can't do that with arrays. We use this function called var dump, and in here we want to put in the expressions. In this case, languages. And what this is going to do is it's going to print out this really nice, neat, easy to read message that contains the contents of the array. Now, there we go. So you'll see that the result of this, it prints out, it says an array where size is 4. So the 0th element at index 0, it's a string called Java, and the length is 4. There are 4 letters. At index 1, it's PHP with 3 letters. At 2, it's JavaScript, and at 3, it's Swift. So if I want to see the contents of the array, I can just use this var dump method, and then it will print out each index, and then it will each value based on that particular index. So if you want to see the contents of an array, that is how you would do it. Let's see. The next thing that we want to do is we'll talk about custom indices or custom indexes. Now, in a lot of languages like Java, you can't define custom indexes. You have your number indexes, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in PHP, you can actually define the keys. You can define, they're called keys, or the index names. So basically, if you've used a map before in other languages or a dictionary, that's basically the same thing. Instead of having a separate map or dictionary type in PHP, it instead uses the array, and you can have your own indices. So let's think of a good example. Let's say that let's say that we've just played a game of soccer, and we want to store all of the scores for each player. So this is creating an array with custom keys. So we're going to call this scores, and we're going to use this same array function, but what we're going to do this time is we're going to specify the key. The key is going to be, so I'll just write this note, key is player, and value is score. So let's say that the first player was Jason, and let's say that Jason got a score of 10. So we first write Jason. Now, right now, this array contains Jason at index 0, but we want to write this equals sign arrow, and this kind of looks like an arrow pointing to, and then we'll put in 10. So now what we're saying is, instead of using numbered indices 0, 1, 2, 3, we're now using string indices. So if I want to get access to this, I can give it Jason, and then it will give me 10. So let's just take a quick look, and we'll add some more results here. But let's just see, how do you get an array, how do you get a certain element in an array? And I should have done this before we started. But we're going to say, find an element in the array. So let's say that we want to echo out a particular element inside of the array. Let's say that we want to echo the first element, or I should say the element with index 0. That would be the PHP element. So we obviously want to use languages, and when we want to specify what index it is, we put a we put square brackets, and then we put the index. So in this case, we'll say 1. If I go ahead and reload, you'll see it says PHP. So what it did is it said, okay, we're using this languages array here. Now we want to go to index 1, which is PHP. So this right here evaluates to PHP, and therefore it echoes PHP. But let's say we want to find an element in the array with custom keys. So if we want to use our scores, so let's say that we want to echo the 0th, or the first score, or the score at index 0. Now, we have custom indices here. I can't just say score is 0, because you'll see, or I'm sorry, it's supposed to be scores. If I do this, you'll see it says undefined offset 0. Like, there's no 0 here. If I specify the keys, then now I'm using keys and not numbers. So if I want to do this, I can write the word Jason there. And if I echo scores Jason, let's reload this, and it will now echo 10. Let's just put in like a space so that it's not all together. It'll now echo out 10. Because what happened is it went into scores, says, okay, we're using this array called scores. Then it indexed Jason. We said that for the key Jason, the value, it goes over to the value, which is 10, and it then prints out 10. So we can add a couple of different other things here. Let's say Anna has a score of 12, and Steve has a score, I'm sorry, that wasn't supposed to be a comma. So Anna's score is 12, Steve's score is 29. So these are the 3 players. The indices are Jason, Anna, and Steve. The values are 10, 12, and 29. So that is how that works. Again, these are called keys. They're really supposed to be called keys. And then these are called values. In this case, the keys are just numbers. So now we know how to find a particular score. There are just 2 more very important things about arrays that I want to cover. The first thing is, let's say that we want to get a list of scores. Let's say that we want to take this scores and we want to figure out the average of the scores. We want to take 10, 12, and 29, add them together, and then divide by 3, or whatever the number of scores is. What we need to do is we need to be able to isolate the values and ignore the keys. We don't care about who made the score, we just care about the scores themselves. So we can say, we're going to create 2 arrays. We're first going to say if we want to know, not keys, we're going to do values. We're going to say score values. So if I want to get only the values, I want to ignore the keys, there's an awesome method called array values. And I can give it the array of scores. And now let's go ahead and I will, not echo, I will var dump score values. And I might as well do scores as well, just so that we can see it. And we'll just call this getting keys and values. So let's reload the page, and you'll see that then we see our original array, or we see our scores array that says Jason, Ann, and Steve. So Jason is 29, or 10, Ann is 12, Steve is 29. So the indices, instead of being 0 through 2, it's Jason, Ann, and Steve. Then if we look at this score values array, you'll see it has the indices as numbers again. We've gotten rid of Jason, Anna, and Steve, but we still have 10, 12, and 29. So if we want to isolate it. Now if we would rather isolate the keys, we can write score keys is equal to, you guessed it, array keys given scores. And then let's just var dump it so that we can see exactly what's happening. Score keys. Cool. So now you'll see that we have our numbered indices, and then the keys are now the values. So if you want to isolate the keys, I'll just write isolating. If you only care about the values, you can use array values method. If you only care about the keys, you can use the array keys method. So those are 2 very important methods that you'll want to know when you're dealing with arrays. Let's see, there's 1 or 2 more important things. The next thing that we're going to do is looping through arrays. So let's look back up at our languages array that we made up at the top. Let's say that we want to go through every single language in there, and we want to print out I teach Java, I teach PHP, I teach JavaScript, I teach Swift. Now we could write 4 separate echoes, but that would be 4 lines of code, and if I were to add another language in there, which I will one day, then I would have to add another echo statement every time it belongs, and that wouldn't really make sense with arrays. If I'm using an array, I declare my list of things, and then it should work everywhere. So we're going to use what is called the for each loop. We already know about the for loop, and you can actually still use a for loop. I'll show you both of them. But the for each loop is basically a nicer version of the for loop when you're dealing with arrays. So let's look at the original for loop. So we know we can say for $i is equal to 0. I is less than, and what is it? It's size of languages. So if we want to know the size of languages, if we look on here, it says the size of the array is 4. So we use the size of method, and the size of languages will be 4. So I is going to go from 0 to 3. It's not going to go to 4. And then this will cover every single index, and we'll, of course, say I++. And then let's say that we want to echo I teach, and then we will append languages at index I. So I'm saying I teach, and then I'm adding languages at I. So now it'll put it on one line, but you'll see it says I teach Java, I teach PHP, I teach JavaScript, I teach Swift. And maybe we will have it do a line break so that it looks better. There we go. So now it's going to go through each of the languages in this array, and it's going to do it. So let's say that I had a new language, and I decide that I'm going to teach golf script. And we'll add that to the array, and if I reload, it now up here, we'll see we obviously added golf script, but now here it says I teach golf script. By adding it in this one place, the loop will then work. The count, the size of, is now 5, so it'll still run through everything, and then it'll print out all of the languages. But let's say that we want to do this a little bit easier. In this case, we really don't care about I. We just need to know each language. We can use the for each loop, and we write it like this. For each languages as language. Excuse me. And then we're going to copy this echo, and we're going to, instead of languages at index I, we're just going to write language. And let's just make it a little bit less confusing. We're going to call this lang. Now if I reload, golf script goes away obviously, but now we get the same exact thing just happened 2 times in a row. This code is obviously a little bit more concise because, okay, what happened here? It's going to go through languages, and it's going to take each value and assign it to lang and then run the loop. So the first time this happens, it goes and grabs the first value, which is Java. It assigns the value of lang to Java. So it'll print out I teach Java. The value of lang is Java. This is finished. The next time it's going to grab PHP, the next element, and it's going to set lang equal to PHP. It's going to say I teach PHP, and it's going to keep going. It's going to do Swift. It's going to say I teach Swift. Then there's nothing more to do, so the loop is finished. So it's similar to the for loop. It's just the for each loop. It's a little bit more concise. But if you do need access to this I, for example, maybe you're writing out a list and you want to write, I, and then languages I. So you can say 1, Java, 2, PHP, 3, JavaScript, 4, Swift. You need a for loop, but for a lot of cases you can just use the for each. There's one other special thing about the for each loop. Let's say that we want to work on our scores. We could use a regular for loop if we care about that I, and then we could use these array values and array keys, and we could print out score values at index I and score keys at index I, and then deal with it like that. But the for each loop is a little bit special here. We can say for scores as, and I can write as $player, and then my equals sign arrow, and then we'll call it score. So now what it's saying is, in this case, I care about the key and the value. So it's going to assign player to be the key and score to be the value. So let's say that we echo player scored, and then we'll say score. This should be a dot. And then dot points. We should probably put in our line break. If I reload it, let's say Jason scored 10 points, Anna scored 12 points, and Steve scored 29 points. So the first time this runs, the value of player is assigned to the key, which is Jason, and score is assigned to 10. So it prints out Jason scored 10 points. And this will run, the key is player, the value is score. So that is almost pretty much everything about arrays that you'll need to know, at least for now. I guess one last really quick thing is that arrays can contain arrays. So like I could say $data is equal to array where the name is project, and then we need a comma, and then we'll say items is an array where the items are where the items are thing and stuff, and then we can do it like this. And if we want to var dump this and see what it looks like, we'll check at the bottom. You'll see that it's an array of size 2. The first one is name, which is project. Then items itself is an array, and inside of the items array are 2 elements. So you can put arrays inside of arrays. You just do it like this. So I said items, instead of assigning items to be a value, I assign it and I use this array function again, and then this array is going to contain thing and stuff. So you can nest arrays together, and that can be helpful if you have large pieces of data. Maybe if you have a form, if you're validating a form in PHP or responding to a form in PHP, you can group things as arrays and deal with it like that. So that is all for this video. That's pretty much anything that you're ever going to need to know about arrays. They're just collections of data, but especially in PHP, more so than other languages, it's important because when you're dealing with all of those global arrays like get, post, session, server, and everything, you really need to know how arrays work. So as always, subscribe if you want to see more, comment with what you want to learn. If you like this video, click the like button. Thanks so much for watching and hearing me out. I know this was a long video, and I'll see you guys soon with some more code.